Roy.
Awesome. Okay,
Look at
so
you
we're right here in
guys.
front of the equipment, and Roy is going to pre-treat and cure it, and print and cure. So we're just going to go through that, take 5 minutes. Some of you might be getting a drink of water, or getting something to eat, whatever. But I'm going to turn it over to Roy, and then I'll be talking in the background.
Okay, so basically, first start out with a shirt. I want to make sure that I'm pre-treating as high up as possible, close to the collar as possible. In case you're running your image up higher, you want to make sure you get ample pre-treat. And then on our speed shooter, not that we're trying to sell it today, but it does a very good job pre-treating. Nice even coat.
Roy, real quick, how are you controlling how much pre-treat goes on the shirt? Because we talked about that earlier, about how you can have too little or too much. So how are you controlling that to make sure it's perfect?
Well, there's two controls, obviously. One is how much distance I'm going to cover on the shirt for pre-treat. And secondly is on ours, it's more or less, which is basically the speed that the nozzle's moving. The nozzle sprays at a constant rate, and then it's going to travel at a specific speed. The faster it goes, the less pre-treat. The slower it goes, the more pre-treat.
And pretty much all pre-treaters work
in the same
similar fashion.
Yeah. Some have multiple nozzles where you get the spray nozzles overlap. Then you get heavy areas or lighter areas.
Okay.
So ultimately, a single nozzle unit is better. But some people say, well, you can isolate something. You can do that with this one too, just by folding and putting multiple garments in here and pre-treating more than one at a time. For sake of time, we went ahead and taken this shirt, and I've already cured it, and it's completely dry on the surface.
And real quick, can you just show that to the camera again real quick and get up a little closer down? We talked about how too much would leave a big heavy square, and too little you probably wouldn't see anything. So if you look real close, I don't know if this is showing up on the camera or not, but you barely see a faint spots here, and maybe the lighting makes it look a little bit different. So that looks perfect. Okay.
And depends on the pre-treat manufacturer too. You can always add a little bit of distilled water when you're doing the pre-treat, and that will alleviate some of that picture framing of the box that appears.
So I just want to cover that again with you real quick. You said you could add some distilled water to your pre-treat solution. So there's different brands out there. Epson makes their own brand. That's correct. And it comes in a concentrate, and the more the distilled water you add, the more it dilutes it, obviously. So that would be for lighter garments.
Well, ultimately, if you're doing a lighter color with a white base, the one thing to keep in mind, and there was a question on the question and answers that I was going to, was can I mix it at a higher mixture? The one thing to keep in mind, if you start going to 1 to 6, 1 to 4, and all these other numbers, you're going to have to apply more pre-treat to the shirt to compensate. So ultimately, it's better to cut back on the amount of pre-treat and just use a concentration that you can use across the board.
Okay, great.
So if you're using good shirts, you can do a 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Typically, I tell customers when you're starting out and learning, do 1 to 1.
Another brand that we're really big on, big fans of, is Image Armor, and they have two kinds that we sell. One is Image Armor Ultra, and one is Image Armor Light. So the Ultra is for the dark garments. That's correct. That's pretty simple. Tell us a little bit about using the light, and do you need to pre-treat light or white colored shirts?
Basically, you don't need to pre-treat light or white shirts or light colored shirts, depending on your settings in garment grid. And I did an extensive video on YouTube going through all those settings. And the thing you need to keep in mind is when you're washing the garment afterwards, that you're going to have some of the ink lighten up and wash out. So you want to compensate with more ink on a lighter garment if you're not pre-treating that color. That's basically the biggest difference. It is cheaper to add more ink than it is to add pre-treat on the actual shirt.
Because you're not printing with white. So the
That's
CMYK
correct.
is cheap.
Yeah. So yeah, CMYK ink is a lot cheaper than adding pre-treat to that process.
I would say, Roy, just from a personal point of view, when I printed white shirts for myself or family or friends, I always pre-treat just because I like the look better. It seems to come out crisper, cleaner, and brighter when I pre-treat it. And if I add more ink to a white shirt, I kind of feel like it muddies up a little bit. Is that, would you say that's accurate?
Well, I would say that in some cases that is accurate depending on the setting. If you are running in what they call a double stripe, where you're actually applying ink, coming back and applying a second coat of ink, similar to a double white base. If you're doing something like that, you can put a pause in between that second pass of color. Plus, there's also an ink blot reduction setting, which allows you to lay a yellow base down first, or your yellow first, which actually starts to create a base on the fibers to not allow the other colors to blot into the fibers and spread and create that same thing that you're talking about. So again, there's other ways around it, and some people don't have pre-treat available, and they're doing some light garments here and there, and they don't want to have to go and order some. There's ways to get around it. Again, there's a video that we've done a couple weeks back that you can go look at our YouTube station.
Absolutely brilliant.
The one thing I did want to mention in reference to what you had said earlier was on the dark pre-treat. The Image Armor Ultra Dark. Also, if you look at the paperwork on that, the cell sheet on it, you can dilute that up to 1:1 with distilled water to try to alleviate or minimize the picture framing or crystallization that may occur on certain colors of shirt. So keep that in mind. Do a test. Start out with like a 25% water, yada yada, and see what works good for you if you wanted to go with something like that.
Awesome, Roy. I can't tell you guys how much this guy knows. He's absolutely brilliant. You just heard a whole bunch of really good nuggets of information. If you want to get a hold of him, you can email support@equipmentzone.com and he can respond to you. Email's usually best just because he can give you a very definitive answer that you can refer back to. And also maybe he will send you a link to a video that will explain.
Hey Jeff, can you have Roy?
Anything else to add? That was amazing, by the way.
Well, that's basically it.
All right.
Unless you have anything
That's
else.
it. All right.
Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, guys. And we'll get started back here with the next session.
All right, so that was fantastic. We'll get a close-up of that print. That was an amazing print. Came out great on a black shirt. So I know Roy's volume was a little bit down, but they were sharing there for a second. So thank you to Roy and thank you to Jeff.